Hey, welcome to episode number 55 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast. We're recording February 16th, 2020. My name's Eric. I'm the host of the show. I'm based in Southern Ontario. I'm a hunter, target shooter, ham radio operator, VE3, EPN, and computer geek. I got into preparedness when I was working frontline emergency services and witnessed an over-reliance on emergency services during major events such as ice storms, power outages, etc. I started a small preparedness company to help people get prepared and to be better able to look after themselves for at least 72 hours, if not longer.
My name is Ian, and I'm totally impressed at watching Eric try and do his intro without coughing. That was super awesome.
Oh, it was tricky, and I should be wearing a mask.
Yeah. Anyways, my name is Ian, and I live on Vancouver Island. I'm an outdoor enthusiast, sport shooter, reloader, my farm's designated handyman.
I'm Alan, and my friends and family call me a safety nerd. As a first responder, I see the benefit of preparation over reaction to emergencies. I teach first aid and coach my family and friends to be better prepared. I'm a locksmith by trade. I've worked in the physical security industry for more than 20 years now.
I am Colin Saunders, and I'm a 21-plus year veteran of the Canadian Forces. I'm a dad. I'm a welder, an outdoor enthusiast, firearms and veterans advocate, and field officer for the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights.
And hello from Canada's East Coast. I'm Hughes from Nova Scotia. I'm a Canadian Armed Forces veteran, volunteer firefighter and station chief, and volunteer search and rescue technician and prepper. I've been preaching and living the prepper lifestyle to varying degrees for the last 6 years or so, and this was born out of necessity to ensure the short-term survival of my family, which includes 3 young children.
All right. If you want to help support the show and keep the Canadian Prepper Podcast on the air, you can buy a Canadian Prepper Podcast t-shirt at preparedness.ca. All the proceeds help keep lights on and the backup generator fueled, and might even throw a couple cough drops my way as well.
If you're enjoying the show, please take a few minutes and like us on Facebook.
Eric is literally dying without our t-shirt sales.
Oh, yeah. He's trying his best to put on the brave face there. That's pretty good. If you're enjoying the show, please take a few minutes to like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Canadian Prepper Podcast and submit a review on iTunes. Also, we want your feedback, good or bad, or even if there's a topic you want us to cover. You can email us at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca.
All right. So we've got some masked content for you in this episode. We're going to start off with some preparedness-related news articles, if I could talk tonight. Next, we're going to be letting you know how we've improved our preparedness since the last episode. Then we're going to get into the main topic of the episode, personal protective equipment. So we'll move into some news articles.
I only put one up today. Via Rail has stopped almost all of its service nationwide, and freight movement has also been affected kind of east of Toronto towards the coast, mostly due to protests. I will present the CBC article without commentary, but it is specifically in defiance of court injunctions and a few other things that should probably have made this go away by now. But it is affecting a lot of travelers, a lot of freight, and now apparently upwards of 6,000 jobs.
Now I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that it's still cold out in the Quebec way.
I would assume so. Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, Colin, it's still kind of winter there, right?
Oh, yeah, very much so. Yeah.
So, remember back earlier this winter, they had that railroad strike with the conductors were having a strike, and Quebec was losing their mind because they weren't getting their propane shipments done the daily from Alberta. So, I wonder how they're doing now. Because it's kind of the same thing, right? Like there's like the freight issue. It's like doesn't matter what caused the stoppage; it's still a stoppage. So once again, we'll probably see an energy hit until the warm weather hits. Anyway.
Oh yeah, that's definitely coming.
Yeah, very interesting.
There's talk about affecting the grocery chain as well.
Yeah, I read that today.
Yeah,
I know. Here in Nova Scotia, they were saying that all of the propane is brought in through a rail car at a rate of about three rail cars per day of propane, and without that, they've had to begin rationing for some customers. Some industries that use propane have had to switch to alternative means of fuels. There is a refinery in St. John's that can do propane, but only about half of what was being brought in by rail cars. So we're starting to feel it now too on the East Coast there.
Yeah, it's funny how it's the globalism interconnected thing. It doesn't take much to cause havoc nationwide. That's for sure.
Nope. This is something we prepare for.
Yeah, a couple 100 pounders just goes a long way. Yeah, so I got a couple of articles I just want to throw in there. My wife actually showed me this one because she got it sent to her from a friend. Canada's Emergency Act. It's not something that's often talked about, but it is something that's was kind of talked about in the States for a while, but we've had it for a long time, I guess. And then a couple interesting things that one of the things that triggers Canada's Emergency Act is disease among the population. So as we know, there's been lots of talk in the news about coronavirus and stuff. And I thought it was just good to put the link in there because there's some interesting stuff about what they can do with the Emergency Act once it gets activated. Forfeiture of property, warrantless searches, financial compensation if they seize your property. But the good news is if they seize your property, they just put a government assessor on it. They tell you what it's worth and they just pay you that with no recourse.
Because it's going to be a fair assessment, I'm sure.
It'd be a great assessment, I'm sure. And then the most fascinating conspiracy-minded thing of all was at the end of the Emergency Act is there is an appendix that includes an oath of secrecy so that if you're involved with this act, you're sworn to not tell anybody about what goes on during the execution of this act. So, anyway, so
to Fight Club.
Yeah, it's kind of like Fight Club. So Part 1, 5B applies to us. I just thought I'd mention that. And then the other one, the Canadian government is evacuating the passengers from the Diamond Princess cruise ship of death there from Yokohama Harbor, where they had, I think it's 300 passengers now have come down with the coronavirus, but they're shipping the ones that aren't affected out and chartering a plane to do so. So at least the government did something for their people now, which is a good thing.
And that's nice.
Yeah, that's all I had.
Of them, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And that's all I had. Anybody else?
They probably only did that because they were taxpayers.
Well, if they weren't paying taxes anymore, like if they're drawing off the system, they'd probably just let them just, let nature take its course. But, they're probably contributing still. So,
Yep.
Anyway.
Well, maybe we'll move into what we've done lately for preps then.
Yeah, I think I'm first. So I was in Toronto last week. Unfortunately, didn't get to do much, but I did start a second batch of moonshine this weekend. So hopefully we'll be bottling that in about 3 weeks or so there. And that's all I managed to get done last week.
Oh, very nice. For myself, it's been a never-ending boxing and shipping out of these wonderful N95 masks. So there's been no shortage of orders. So it's been a little taxing as far as getting everything boxed and shipped out and sourced, but I'm making it happen slowly. I think I've only got about 5 back orders right now. So
That's
I'll take it. It is nice when,
Yep.
it is nice when somebody does that internet meme thing and says, "Shut up and take my money."
Yeah, it's great. Yep.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
For myself, I just been doing some reloading because it's the reloading season. As if it's rainy out, that's basically a good thing to do inside. Rotated some food stocks that were kind of coming due that need to be used up. Got some more medical supplies for the family. Went to the range with the wife for Valentine's Day, which is always a fun day.
Nice.
Scrounged brass while we were there. We forgot to mention that, but yeah, we did that too, of course. Then we this morning we went for a little wild edible walk because stuff's starting to spread out of the ground now. So we picked up some wild edible and made some wild edible soup today.
Nice.
And that was it.
Nice.
Alan's?
Alan. All right, then. We will move into the main topic. He's there. His mic's just muted.
Colin, you got anything?
Well, I spent some time in Toronto.
Sorry, a little choppy in this end. Sorry for the delay. Went.
Yeah, we went to Toronto.
No, I'm good. Oh. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
We can hear you, Alan. Yeah.
There we go. All right. So this week, I had a knife go missing. So unfortunately, I'll use the significant air quotes there. I get to go knife shopping. Added some more first aid supplies to the stores, and that's about the extent of what I've gotten done this week. What I've accomplished.
There we go.
Cool. Colin?
Okay. Well, it's funny you should mention knives. You lost your knife. Did it look anything like this?
It did not.
Okay. Well,
Nice.
this was my mail call this week. This is from knife maker Nick Huff out of Fort Worth, Texas, and
Cool.
I call this one the Huckleberry. It's 5160 high carbon steel, 8 3/8 inch blade, leather stack handle. It's pretty kick ass. It's differentially quenched. You could you could circumcise a gnat with it. Other than that, I've also I made some CBD suckers this week. Because all those years in the army, I got achy joints and bones and arthritis and all kinds of stuff, and I find that's one thing that helps me sleep at night. So
Nice.
Cool. I'd call it a problem solver, but whatever they want to call it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it is.
All right.
Awesome.
Now we can move into the main topic.
Sure thing. Well, I guess where to even start with all this stuff? I guess we should start on the hot topic tonight, which is I guess disease or biologicals, but then we can move on to nuclear and chemical later on. But I'll just start off. Everybody can just jump in any time, that's for sure. Yep. Masks. So that's kind of the hot topic, like Eric was mentioning. So
Sure is.
Yeah, we can always start off with the N95 mask, which is kind of the go-to. But as we know, that leaks on the side, thanks to Dr. Alton. He mentioned that was it 2 episodes ago, and he mentioned the fact that it's not 100%. It still leaks on the side. It's also about how you take it on and put it off. It can be important how you fit it.
Absolutely.
But there's the better masks out there, the half-face mask, for example, that has the P100 rating. So if you actually take off the filter element here, you can see it's mentioned on here. It's kind of scuzzy, but it says P100 on it. And there's a difference between N95s, R95s, and Ps, like P100s and stuff. Actually, I put a link in the show notes because I didn't know. So I had to look it up. But so one's good for particulate. The other one gets to be more like vapors, like paint fumes and everything else. But basically, there's like N stands for, like in Ian terms, it's like not resistant, R for resistant, and P for proof. So obviously, if you want a better job, stick with the P stuff.
Yep.
But obviously, depending on what filter you get is what it's good for, right?
Absolutely.
So, question for you guys: if you know, what's the mechanism? Does it work through absorption? Like, how long are these filters good for? I mean, I know the N95 is somewhat of a disposable mask, but the one you mentioned, Ian, there, the half mask or the full mask, that has the replaceable filters. How often would you want to change those?
Well, it's actually interesting because there's life like expiry dates on these as well. But also when you store them, I have another one over there, but it's in a bag. When you open the bag, it actually starts the clock. And on some of them, you don't want to have the bag open for more than a day or two before you use it, and then you basically it's only good for a few days. It all depends. Right. It all depends on what you're protecting against. Like this one, I use for like drywall dust, just to keep that off. Because the N95s, if you use that for drywall, you end up with just a white mask around your mouth. It doesn't do anything. But you'll tell as soon as they're starting to wear out because they start to get clogged, basically, because it's just a fiber filter is all it is, right?
I like some of the ones that I have through Honeywell. Their test is, well, if you start to taste the product that you're trying to protect yourself against, it's time for a new filter.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, okay.
You see that
that's what's known as a qualitative test.
Yeah. Yeah, they also suggest just every 18 hours or so of exposure to whatever it is you look in the filter, and they say reference your standard operating procedures at your employer. So there's all kinds of different things that they say, but I figured that test, if you start tasting what you're trying to filter out, then it's time to push the filter.
So what does coronavirus taste like? Just anybody?
Well, it depends, with lime or without.
Skunky yet luggery, but
no, that's good because I mean I've got a half mask, and I don't have any replacement filters for it, so maybe that's something I should think about investing. I didn't know how long that they were actually good for, so that's really good to know.
Yeah, the Honeywell one's shelf life packaged is about 5 years. Okay, and then as soon as you open them up, it could be, depending on the type of filter you have, it could be 18 hours, it could be 6 hours. They'll give you kind of a reference with the packaging and the instructions.
Got it. Okay.
I have a question for you guys.
They're basically designed to last one shift of average work.
Okay.
So when it comes to a lot of this coronavirus stuff, you got to think, though, you may or may not be operating in an environment which could even be days, if there was a serious threat. And so I wonder, if you're in some kind of environment where you can't take your mask off, do any of those other masks have drinking tubes?
Good call.
See, mine does not.
I know the military issue ones. Right inside, there's a little tube, and you could usually set it up to reach it with your tongue and pull it into your mouth. and there's a part on the outside of your mask you can unplug and plug into your water bottle and hold it up, and you can drink, and then when you're done, you just unplug it and into the mask you go.
Well, even if it's not days, it's just if you're exerting yourself. I mean, you get dehydrated pretty fast, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't take long, especially when you're
typical. The typical workplace mask is designed for, I put it on, I go do my thing, I come out at break time, take it off, drink my water, drink my coffee, have my smoke, go back inside, and coming on and off. Not designed to be intaking water and food while you're actually working. So it's a really different intent. Which of course is why it's a really different design, and that's where the military style gas mask with that drinking tube certainly gives you a distinct advantage.
Yeah, absolutely.
It also has another thing I don't know as if other respirators have. There's a one-way check valve in there too. Let's say you get hit with a nerve agent or something that causes you to be nauseous or sick to your stomach and you puke in your mask. You can actually just shake your head back and forth, and you could actually, through the force of gravity, shake it out through that one-way valve to kind of clear your mask. Or you can pressurize your mask and keep blowing, and eventually it will blow any debris inside your mask, or even gas or vapors or nerve agents or anything. You could push it back out.
Yeah, it's not quite to the same level, but basically you can see on the inside of these, it's got like the front one is the check valve and the side ones are the intake. But it's not going to allow you to barf outside of it for sure. Like it's basically just going to allow you to breathe heavy. But like I was mentioning, like you know how moist these things get on the inside when you start breathing in them for a couple hours. So yeah, dehydration's a thing for sure.
I'll tell you guys right now, this is my mask that I use for firefighting. It's I think it's an MSA Firehawk. Anyways, so sorry, no, it's an MSA Ultra Elite. And by experience, you cannot throw up in these. You actually have to lift your mask, throw up, and then put it back on. Because if you look in the bottom here, that's your intake valve for your positive pressure, and then you've got your exhaust here in the nose cone. But yeah, that's interesting because I know in the military one, like Colin said, you can throw up in your mask and shake it out through gravity, but definitely not the fire service one. So
yeah,
I'd hate to have to prove that one, right?
The full face masks that I've seen either. That's something good to have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I never even considered that.
It's nice that you can hook yours up to a tank, can you not?
With the fire one, yeah. So this is the design to basically have an air tank to it, but MSA does make an adapter that you can put the cartridge style filters on it. We typically can use those during like a rehab or like a cleanup, but we typically try to keep our own air on it, just because I'd rather breathe my own air than whatever could still be in the air as far as gases and all that kind of stuff goes.
So for the military or the firefighting stuff, do you guys have some sort of anti-fog thing going on with that?
Yeah, there's the anti-fog comes about in the way that the air circulates through the mask. It comes in through the filter, it goes up through the nose, and it circulates past the eyepieces before it's get blown out, and that's what helps keep it fairly fog-free.
For the ones for the fire service, if you fog up, this is only a single layer gas, but what you can do is you can hit your bypass, which basically throws in a large amount of cold air, and that'll typically take the fog out of the mask. But that's the only real way to do it, I guess. And Alan probably has experience with that as well there.
Yep, absolutely. I find as long as I'm breathing at a normal rate, I don't fog up too badly, but when we're standing around not doing anything is when I fog up, and you crack your bypass valve a little bit, and you lose a couple of breaths of air, but you get to be able to see what you're doing. I find if I have my mask on but I'm not on air, I fog up pretty quick. And I've heard of some fire services using like dish soap on the inside to prevent fogging. But I've also read that because there's ammonia in most dish soaps, that's probably not the best option because it's not your mask isn't rated to resist that. So I haven't investigated that any further, but I know that's been a scuba diving trick for many years.
And one thing I wanted to point out on this mask as well here is that there's a 3.5 millimeter jack here that goes to a voice box right here, and then I've got an earpiece here. So this is typically found on officers' masks. So instead of trying to scream into your radio, you can actually have a decent conversation through a radio, which is a nice feature on these masks as well.
And depending on the manufacturer, those are getting more and more common. Not even at the officer level, but even at the firefighter level.
Right.
The reasoning that they gave when I was reading about it is that if you have to call for a mayday, it's not just an officer that needs to be heard clearly. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think for us, there's just a cost thing. When we acquired these, so.
So I guess no matter which one we buy for civilian use, you got to make sure you get the right filter for it as well, depending on what you're trying to protect against. Do you guys have like what's that, Eric?
I said that's definitely the key is doing your research on the filters, because just randomly buying one, it might not filter what you're looking for. It might look nice.
Yeah, exactly. If you're looking for a paint room filter and you get a N90 or like a disease filter, it's a little bit different. It's not going to work the same way. So yeah, that's why I put the link to the website there that kind of gives a lowdown on all the masks stuff. So I guess
typically,
go there as well.
Ian, you might know from the research that you've done. Will the military ones filter for airborne diseases like the corona one?
Actually, Colin might know better.
I couldn't tell you how fine it filters, like down to how many microns or whatever.
Yeah.
My experience typically was more during training, we'd use tear gas.
Right.
And that was what we used to simulate all of our drills and stuff. And I could, every time I did it, I could taste tear gas through my filter.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. But I mean,
that'd be interesting to see. Yeah, thanks, Ian.
Because I would think like an NBC suit would be like a different filtration level altogether, especially if you're trying to keep like nerve gas out.
Well,
I don't even know
the suits are carbon impregnated, and they actually aren't meant to last that long, but they're carbon impregnated to kind of help neutralize like chemical agents, nerve agents, stuff like that, or biological agents, anything. It's just a buffer zone. You know,
yeah. Like during the research for this episode, I was actually listing on or trying to figure out what's the best way to test your seals and everything else. And one guy recommended using bear spray getting a guy to use bear spray on you to see if you get the bear spray smell.
Oh.
So I was like, well, it'd be a shame to find out your seal was no good.
You should just check your seal with your hand, put it over your canister, and try and breathe in. You know,
there's a way. Yeah.
That's how we do it. Yep.
That's how you check your seal. Yeah.
Yeah, but I was just thinking like anywhere on the skin too. If you're trying to keep your like your goggles tight and everything else, you want to make sure. But oh man, that would just suck if the seal was no good. Anyway, but back to the suit idea with the carbon impregnated suits. I guess we could talk about the Tyvek suits and all those other stuff. It's also a hot ticket item, I think, right now.
I have some Tyvek suits here. Tracy ordered them from Uline.
Yeah, like they're actually still available in a lot of places. Like that's not something the average panicky patty goes out and finds, other than the N95 mask and maybe safety goggles. But like I think you can get these at Home Depot still for like, I don't know, maybe $10. Not even that much.
Yeah.
A couple interesting supplies places. If you are in a place where they've kind of sold out and Home Depot doesn't have it, painting supply places would be a thought. The other one that's kind of what nobody would think of. Most chicken farms, believe it or not, actually have a big stock of Tyvek suits because they're worried about spreading disease between farms. And they're big on biosecurity. So if you actually wanted to, you could probably go to a battery chicken farmer and see if he had a few Tyvek suits for sale, because, yeah, they're big on biosecurity, like big time. So because my kids did a tour at a local chicken producer, and they had to suit them all up to even walk through the area, like because they don't want anybody even like walking in with dirt on their shoes.
Is that a segue into next week's episode?
Perhaps.
But that's also a good resource is anybody that does farm supply. So I know around here in Southern Ontario we have TSC, which is not directly related to the Tractor Supply Company out of the US, but not indirectly related either from the looks of the logo and everything. But they also stock a lot of similar things that are specifically designed for being on the farm, such as biosecurity products.
Yeah, so
which would actually make an excellent protocol to prevent spread of disease.
Yeah, when you think about it, it's the same principle. It's the same prevention methods, everything else. Because right now China is also luckily enough going through an H1N1 outbreak as well with their poultry flock. So because they're having a good month, it seems. NBC suits. Just out of curiosity, Colin, can you tell us anything about those? You said the carbon impregnated stuff, but was there a difference in the mask or anything else?
You mean as far as the mask goes? The mask is the mask. The one you get is the one that's used for training and for the real deal.
Yeah.
The canisters, I believe, in a chemical environment, I believe they're good for about 2 hours, and they have carbon in them that takes a lot of odors and tastes out of things, but also helps neutralize a lot of active ingredients. So.
Now, a question for you, Colin. So, having been in the military as well, I remember with my issued gas mask, I was issued one canister, and that was open for years and years and years. Like, I never had to replace it, right? Yeah. Do those expire just like the cartridges do for the full face respirators?
If I remember correctly, the outside foil that the canisters come in do have an expiration date on them. However, that doesn't mean they wouldn't be good in, let's say, the gas hut or anything. In fact, I used a lot of expired canisters when I did training in the gas hut. But, if it were the real deal, I definitely want to have something that's not expired.
Right. I remember doing the gas hut a few times with the same canister over and over again, right? So,
yeah, I think I had the same one for about 20 years.
Awesome. Okay.
All right. I guess under the banner of protective equipment as well, it's kind of often overlooked and not nearly as glamorous, but rubber boots.
Gumbies,
if you're going to be decontaminating afterwards. Yeah. I mean, if you're going to be decontaminated later on, you're going to be spraying it down with bleach. It's probably easier to seal something around, like a suit around rubber boots than anything else. So absolutely. I guess if you don't have a new set, maybe now's the time. That doesn't have a tiny hole in it or anything else.
And oftentimes you see in the movies they use just plain old duct tape to seal around gloves and boots and all that kind of stuff. And from what I've read, that seems to be a fairly effective method at keeping stuff out when it comes to seams and arms and legs and all that kind of stuff. So,
yeah, I think as long as it blocks airflow, and that's what duct tape literally was invented for, was preventing airflow, right? So, why not? I think just removing it would be a bit of a pain in the behind without a partner in crime to help you out.
Well, you can't effectively doff your equipment yourself. You need somebody else to be able to do that for you.
Oh, I would imagine. Yeah.
We use duct tape in training. When I just went through my my hazmat testing, I don't know, a month or so ago, and we had to we said, like, we're using duct tape for training, but for the real deal, like the pros use a chemical resistant tape that mostly indicates whether the dye in it will indicate if it's been exposed to specific chemicals. And I think that was the main difference between chemical resistant tape and duct tape, is that it will show you if it's come in contact with specific types of chemicals.
Sounds expensive.
That's
kind of cool.
That's the type of stuff.
It sounds really expensive, but it also tells you actually what level of decon you need. So
right.
If you're going into a meth lab, you need it.
Oh yeah. Talk about breathing protection right then and there.
It's not cheap, but it's not a bad thing to have, so you can see what's going on.
All right. Yeah. Gloves. I guess we can talk about the gloves. Remember, number one rule, right, Alan? No black ones.
Well, if you're doing first aid.
Yeah. So we got the two types.
We go on the assumption that it's respiratory protection until proven otherwise, as opposed to. No black gloves. Black gloves are bad. Anybody who uses it.
Why are black gloves are bad?
Well, because Alan's cutting in and out, I'll walk over him here for a second.
Sorry.
Because basically, if you're...
Sorry, guys,
you're back.
Okay, no. Cutting in and out pretty badly here. So nitrile, vinyl, latex. The only real challenge with latex is that some people are allergic to it. But frankly, if I'm not allergic to it, I really don't care about other people. So nitrile is usually easier to come by. They're a little bit more widely available. I came across an issue last week where my nitrile gloves were had been in my first aid kit for some time. They'd been all balled up, and I went to pull on a pair and just put my hand right through it. So rotate your gloves through. Don't compress them too badly, and just like everything else. Now, I would consider nitrile gloves to be a base layer. I wouldn't use those as my exclusive contact because they're not very resistant to punctures. So something a little heavier on top would be a good next step.
So back to the original question, Colin. So no black ones because you can't tell if it's sweat or blood on the glove if you're actually working on somebody for first aid purposes, but for chemical or biological, it wouldn't be too big of a deal. But so for the listeners that don't know the difference, this is nitrile. This is latex or vinyl, depending on which ones you get. Yeah, like Alan said, one's hypoallergenic, but yeah, thin as can be. And then of course the depending on which ones you buy for the latex or vinyl, everything from acetone to whatever will eat right through it. So you got to be careful with what you're dealing with, not just for diseases, but for various chemicals. Depending on which gloves you use, which ones won't work. Because, like for example, when you're using acetone or anything else for refinishing wood or anything else, yeah, some of these just get eaten like you wouldn't believe. Like you might as well not even be wearing them. But
so they're good for detecting blood stuff, bad for sarin gas. Okay,
pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. But I guess the other thing too is I think Dr. Alton talked on it their last episode, but also go to YouTube and watch a good video on how to properly remove gloves from a biological perspective, because it's not just a matter of like pulling it off and getting your thumb under there and everything else. There's actually a bit of a trick to it that you don't actually contaminate your hands. Right, really badly when you're taking your gloves off, right?
Yeah. I've done that in first aid courses before, where you get your gloves all dirty and then you try to take them off without getting anything on you, and it's next to impossible.
Yeah,
I do that. I do that in every class. When we use I use shaving cream because it's really easy to tell when you've screwed it up.
Yeah, it's a bit of a skill set.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's worth practicing and worth doing a few times. For practical purposes, go to the dollar store, buy a pair of like dishwashing gloves, and you can take those off, turn them inside out, and put them back on again. They're a little bit less inconvenient than trying to turn nitrile gloves right side out. But Ian, if you still got those gloves on, can you hold them up again?
Oh, geez, I just took them off.
Oh, no. I just wanted to point out one thing really quick. The nitrile glove sits about there. The latex glove has much longer cuff, which means that you're going to have you're going to have a better chance of overlap and less opportunity to have a gap in your clothes. So a little bit longer gap, which means you're more likely to have the overlap, so you can tape it down. And when you're buying suits, take them out of the package and try them on. Like I'm an absolute giant. I'm like 6.5 feet tall. Tyvek suits are not made to fit me. So I need to go up a level to an actual chemical protective clothing suit if I wanted something that was going to be resistant. So it's just one of those things to pay attention to. It won't make a world of difference until it makes all the difference.
I just learned something. Yeah, it's about a centimeter to an inch, depending on how you want to wear it. Difference for sure. So it'd be easier to tape them over with the Tyvek suit as well. Like you said, you're right.
Yep. Well, we've all learned something, so I'll bring this episode to an end.
Okay, good. See ya.
So we do have a good question in the live chat here in regards to any thoughts on rubber boots being loose enough to get off without cussing and falling over trying to get out of them.
Yep, do it. If your rubber boots are too tight, you're gonna fall. You're gonna fall down. And I love pointing and laughing at people when they do that. Another thing about rubber boots is when you're trying them on, make sure you're wearing a couple of pairs of socks because those boots are going to keep you dry, but they don't necessarily keep you warm. So if you live in a climate where this week we had temperatures down to about -15 and then +5. One pair of boots can do that all, but if you can layer it, it's even better. Not a bad idea to wear those, order those or get those boots a size too big.
That's exactly what I do. Is I order like one size up and just wear a set of socks with like wool socks over top. That works great because that's basically our wintertime wear around here because it's just so freaking wet all the time. So. Absolutely, that's a good idea, and plus, they come off a lot easier that way too.
And ideally, you whenever you're taking off that gear, and we kind of talked about it in the decon episode or 3 episodes ago when we were talking about setting up a perimeter. Like, you can't effectively take that stuff off yourself without coming into contact with it. So if you got a plan to have, you got to have a decon plan to get that stuff off and put it in a safe area, and then create a barricade where you don't come through that without being fully decontaminated. And again, you can YouTube that. There are a million ways to do it that, depending on your level of threat, but it's critically important that if you're going to do it, you do it right. Something else that I put in the show notes about respirators, they will not work unless you have a clean shave. You will not get a proper fit test. And I know Ian and I discussed it when we were talking about when I first joined the fire department. We were talking about the difference between negative pressure and positive pressure respirators, because Ian's got that got an exception, I guess, or their testing allows them to have facial hair and everything's okay, but it's because it's continuous positive pressure, and they're not isolating, they're not creating an environment. They're just creating an oxygen-rich atmosphere. Whereas, like Hughes and I are, pretty well clean shaven all the time, because it's got to be a proper seal every single time to exclude the environment. So,
and even though I shave with a blade, I keep an electric razor in the truck. So if I happen to have forgotten to shave that morning on my way to a call, I've got about 2 minutes to do a quick electric shave. Right, so just learned the hard way. So.
That's actually ready for a TV commercial at that point, right? Like, when I'm in a rush.
Yeah. When I'm about to enter a burning structure, yeah.
So this episode brought to you by Gillette.
That's right. I know, they got those controversial commercials nowadays. Goggles. Should we move on to those?
Yep.
So are you selling out of those as well, Eric?
You know what? Shockingly, no. The only thing that is going is the N95 masks. Everybody is kind of looking at those and not thinking about any kind of contamination via eyes or even any of the suits. They're just thinking, well, everybody says, the internet says I need an N95 mask, so that's what I'm buying.
Well, what's funny is when Dr. Joe was on the episode, not last week, but the week prior, he had mentioned that the ones that you're supposed to get are the ones that have the protection around the eyes as well. The ones I use in the fire service are typically just like clear, almost like ballistic type plastic lenses that would prevent anything from directly hitting my eyes, but never anything that comes in as like a side spray or anything like that, right? So, almost like the ones you used to wear in like a chemistry lab, right? So they look a little, like that. So I use the ones that are on your left, Ian.
So these ones?
Yeah, those are the ones I use in the fire service. I should be using the ones on the right.
I'll share my screen out here.
Yeah.
So
yeah, those are the ones I'd want to use. Yeah, exactly.
I think
it's a much better seal.
Yeah, much better seal, plus a good ventilation as well. Like, I've got a couple old ones that need to be cleaned up, but if need be, they can certainly be used because they're the same idea, like those ones.
Looks like they fit over top of eyewear too.
Yep. Yeah, they fit over top of prescription eyewear, and they're good for everything from shop class to the pandemic apocalypse, so to speak.
Just from shop class to zombie apocalypse.
With
the ones that Ian just had up there, just keep in mind that all those little vent holes around the side are an opening that stuff is going to get into. They also tend to have really, really terrible elastic bands that don't actually seal it to your face. So those would be kind of the least level that I would care for. Those ones that he's showing up there now, much heavier duty, has a much greater opportunity to seal.
And even
an indirect ventilation, right?
Well, even the air holes on top, like you said, they're indirect. So the virus actually would have to go backwards then back in with the backdraft. And it's actually it's an extra layer because it's like an S shape to get into the mask. So
And,
but Eric, the one you had up, didn't they have like a one-way valve that looked like?
Those ones have indirect ventilation.
Indirect ventilation. Okay, all right.
And so I'll just also keep in mind that like the virus by itself doesn't exist in the atmosphere. Like it has to be attached to a droplet. So it has to be attached to something. It can't. You're not walking into a cloud. You're getting sneezed on, and that's the challenge that we're trying to overcome. On the topic of eyewear, just be aware that if it's not specifically designed to go over prescription glasses, anytime you've got your glasses next to that seal, you're creating a potential opening.
Yep. That's a good point.
Yeah. A couple other things, I guess, in a pinch, if you're like stuck for protective wear, and whether it be disease, firefighting, or whatever, there's a couple other things out there, like O2 masks, like a tank firefighter style.
Mm-hmm.
You guys have like full face with a self-contained breathing apparatus, right?
Yep.
So if you're worried about the air quality or what might be in the air, that's an alternative if you're in a pinch. At work, we have something called a Drager hood, which is good for about 10 minutes of clean air. But it looks like a welder's hood, like you probably use all the time, Colin, like, those heavy duty sandblasting hoods or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it's got a oxygen supply that's good for 10 minutes as well, which is kind of neat.
You use that when you're flying?
Well, yeah, in case
is
of
that
fire,
like
right?
the last 10 minutes before we kiss our butt?
That's sorry guys, try my best. But yeah, no, it's just an emergency piece of equipment we have on board, and so basically it's just firefighting equipment more than anything else. But we also have positive pressure masks, like Alan was mentioning, that we have a choice between 100% and kind of a mix of O2 and outside air. So there's all sorts of safety equipment that will protect your lungs as required.
Well, that's only the pilots that have that, right? That positive pressure air.
Yeah, because it's an altitude thing. The higher up you go, the different type of masks you have to have. Everybody else has got oxygen generators that provide them with
8 minutes or something? Or
yeah, just enough time to get down to breathable air. And then the flight attendants have portable oxygen bottles. So,
right. Okay.
I always assumed those were actually filled with helium in the passenger compartment, because wouldn't that be so much more entertaining?
That would make it way more entertaining. Yeah, it's kind of funny because those things, oxygen generators, which can be found on lots of things other than my workspace, is actually interesting because they create a lot of heat when they're in use. Like They actually get super duper hot because it's a chemical reaction creating the oxygen, which creates another hazard, of course, down the road. But. Mm-hmm. Anyway,
I think the Navy uses something similar too, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh yeah, they would use the Drager hoods for sure, because if you're fighting fires on board the vessel, the fumes and confined spaces and everything else, they'd have to have some sort of a smoke hood. But anyway, I'm dying to ask now, guys, for the NBC gear for the military, how did they train you guys to go potty with that?
Actually,
it's never covered it.
It's funny you say that, because I was the demonstrator for the defecation drills. I did them in Arkansas for the troops before we went to Bosnia. So basically it's just unzipping your NBC suit and peeling back your hood and peeling things back. Basically it's like taking a dump with overalls, and you got to remember to take part of your suit that you're not that's hanging down and tuck it up between your legs in front of you. Right, so obviously you're not.
Right, for anybody who's ever been duck hunting and you've pissed in your waders, we all understand.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You just gotta make sure the suit's out of the way, and also keep in mind don't want to rest that suit on the ground. If you are exposed to a chemical agent and it's been dropped from an aerial from the air and it's all around you, throwing your suit down with it open on top of vegetation that might be contaminated could contaminate yourself when you go to put your suit back on. Just so be mindful of it.
Could also just wear a big diaper. I mean,
yeah,
just shake it at the bottom of your boot when you're done.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah. So that maybe we'll move into some stuff for nuclear.
Run.
So any considerations for that? Yeah, run.
Rule of thumb: if you can't cover that with your thumb, you're too close. If you can cover the blast,
well, these aren't going to save you. Is that what you're saying?
Would you really want to be staring at the blast and measure it with your thumb to begin with?
Nope. Absolutely not. Rule number one of hazmat: don't go past the last dead cop. Right. Same rule applies with nuclear. Don't go past the last dead soldier.
That's right. My internet dropped off there. Did you guys cover the decon stuff?
No, we went. We went from using the potty there to nuclear. We just It's just the way it was.
Sorry about that. Yeah, no, that's all good. Just out of curiosity, so decontamination, whether it be a disease, chemical, whatever. I think Alan was talking a little bit about decontamination before the show. Like, how does that roll with, say, if you get chemicals all over your protective suits and stuff? How do you guys work on that?
Well, the exact, like, the technical decontamination comes down to what you've been exposed to, and so that's a matter of doing your threat analysis. In practical terms, you are you're doing several levels of decontamination. The first level is gross decon, where you're just getting sprayed down with water, brush off all the big stuff. Second level, you're getting scrubbed down with some kind of soap and water, whatever that potentially neutralizer is that will make your that will get you down to the next level. Usually at that point, you start stripping your gear off and leaving it on the contaminated side. We talked before about having a pool of fluid where you can stand in, get your boots clean. The way we do it is, we have, you can do it with a kiddie pool, but you can also do it with a tarp, and you roll the edges of the tarp in, then flip it over, and it creates a small pool. Now we're doing that with a view towards being able to actually catch and retain that contamination, so that we're not spreading it elsewhere. In an SHTF situation, it's that I care less about that. But if we're talking about a proper hazardous material incident, we want to contain as much as we can, prevent the spread, all that good stuff. So for kind of a disease mix, I don't really care, but for a chemical release, then we want to catch as much as we can, contain it. Depending on what you've been exposed to, the actual chemical to clean you off with is going to vary. So we've got like a bleach in the show notes. If what you've been contaminated with is acidic, then bleach is probably not your friend. If what you've been contaminated with is acidic, you probably want to neutralize it with a base of some kind. And that's far beyond my scope. I'm not a hazmat guy beyond knowing not to touch the stuff and not to lick my fingers afterwards.
Well, that's solid advice.
That is solid advice. Yeah.
No, I think with the current news topics too, I think bleach solutions is kind of the way everybody's leaning right now too. So that's where Hughes' video and pool shot comes into play for making your own bleach, or having a steady supply on hand, at least anyway, right?
Yep, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, bleach will kill most biological organisms. So for the average threat that we're going to face, it's an excellent option.
Yeah, and for anyone who's not familiar, the video that I have up there, I think for a 1 pound canister of pool shock, you can make like several thousand gallons of bleach. It's pretty incredible. So yeah, it's well worth it.
That's a really good question from Bane Ironhand, isn't it?
That's a great question. Just says, would UV lights be of any use for airborne stuff? My thoughts would be yes. I know that it's used in some
air filtration systems.
Yep, so absolutely. I think so.
Well, just like solar distillation basically works on UV light, and they talk that most viruses can't handle being in sunlight. I'm going to go with a qualification on the yes, but yes, I would assume so, but I'm not a doctor, so.
Would it help reduce? Probably. Is it your be all end all? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I know even at the municipal level where they're treating, hundreds of millions of liters of water, they use UV light to decontaminate water before it goes back into the watershed. So that's certainly an option, but you would want a specific design system for it. You're not just going to, wander around with a black light you bought at Canadian Tire and hope that it's going to help.
But I do agree that waving your Steri-Pan around like a lightsaber would be pretty cool.
that would be.
The problem with light is that when you're dealing with water, you can pass water directly over the light. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to a light, the light diminishes. It diminishes by a squared value for every time you double the distance. So
it becomes less effective as you go.
The light shining, that UV light shining at 1 inch is substantially more intense than the light, let's say, at 10 inches or at a foot away. It's going to be far less effective. So that light, it can be effective if it's right against the light or right close to it. Like water usually is, because it's passed directly over it.
Yeah, I'd say it's much more practical for water than air, but it's definitely something worth investigating further. I haven't heard of any UV air filtration systems, but that doesn't mean they don't exist.
Yeah. Cool. Well, sorry for this huge segue there, guys. I just was making sure I'm dying there, but back to nuclear, I guess, eh?
Yeah.
Well, my only thoughts with that was like with the NBC gear that even like Colin had in the day and stuff is like it's not going to protect you like Indiana Jones in movie number 4 there and help you survive a blast. But I think if you're just trying to keep fallout off, or sorry, what's that?
So there go my plans. I was basing it all on that.
Well, the solution to pollution equals dilution, right?
Yeah, exactly. So. Yeah, but I mean, like at the very least, it's something you can use as a disposable suit. So if you get some contaminated stuff on you, just doff it. At least it's going to stop your exposure faster, right? If you can get rid of all the contaminated articles that you're dragging around. So, but that's way above my pay grade.
Yeah, I don't recall, having been in the military, I don't recall receiving a lot of training when it came to specifically to nuclear threats. Colin, I don't know what your extent of training is on that, but we didn't get a lot. It was mostly for gas and like chemical exposure and all that kind of stuff.
Nuclear, chemical, and chemical and biological mainly, because I think that they were more likely to be used. A lot of countries that can't afford nuclear technology, they resort to biological and chemical.
All right.
Well, there's less stigma attached to its use as well. It seems to be less blowback if you use a biological weapon. A few years later, everybody's forgotten all about it, right?
And the area can be proven safe a lot faster than obviously a spot like Hiroshima and Nagasaki that still get high readings. So many years, whereas they can drop chemical agents and 48 hours later march into that area and take it over.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So other than that, I don't really have much else for chemical at all. Do you guys?
Just matching the suit to the threat, because there's no one suit that is effective against every type of chemical. So again, it comes back to your threat analysis, having a variety of suits available. Again, they have to be the proper size, because if it's too small, it's completely ineffective. You're going to stand up too fast and rip the shoulders out or whatever it is. And there are what, seven different types between encapsulating and non-encapsulating, and the EPA in the U.S. has 4 different levels, and NIOSH has 3 different levels, and NFPA has 4 different levels, and none of them seem to be in exact agreement. But match the suit to the threat. So depending on what you've got, use the right tape. Again, the system only works if everything is compatible. So if the chemicals in the duct tape that you're using are not compatible with the suit that you're using, you're going to cause an early degradation. And most of those suits are single use and toss them away.
And same goes for your filters on your mask. Make sure that you're matching those to your thread as well. A lot of them will look nice and fancy, and the chemical side sorts different colors. You're not going for fashion; you're going for actual practicality. So,
yep. And the thing that I keep coming back to in every, I've actually got my a couple of my hazmat books open here on my desk while we're talking. Every single type of suit that they talks about heat stress. I'm sure they drilled that into you in the Army as well. Like anytime you're putting on a suit, you're preventing evaporation. You are going to get hot fast, which is
especially in the carbon suits. It kind of neutralizes the carbon, all the sweat. That's why it's only good for so long.
Yeah, so that all of that means that your actual working time in the suit is limited before you just kind of keel over. So be exceptionally aware of that and plan your task before you go into the hot zone. Have your hot zone, your exclusion zone really well set before you do anything. Have a plan for decon, have a plan for emergency decon, have a plan for isolation afterwards, and just be aware that heat stroke and heat stresses are always going to be a problem when you're wearing a chemical suit.
You bring up a really good point there, Alan. Actually, it's like, having a good plan for not just decontamination, but dealing with the used items afterwards, and or like having a spot dedicated to decontamination is kind of, I guess, something a lot of people don't think about at all right off the bat, right?
Well, and in a hazmat incident, we're isolating the hazard and working backwards. In an environment where we're dealing with protecting our homes and protecting ourselves, we're kind of creating a safe zone around our house, and then using that as and then creating a decon point before you enter, as opposed to before you leave. So you're kind of looking at it. You're kind of inverting the scale, and you'd want to decontaminate further away from your house, and then as you get closer to your location, like your bug out location or your house, then you would want to be doing a further, more thorough decontamination, so that by the time you're actually getting up to the house, everybody's clean.
That's a good point.
Yeah. Right. Shall we move into the podcast challenge, or does anybody on the panel have anything else they want to throw in before we do?
No, I'm good.
I didn't have much for this week, so I came up with just try and get one outfit that would allow you to venture out in case of the latest threat, which is the COVID-19 thing. One suit, it's not the best idea, but it is something, I guess. And if you have time, about 10 minutes it takes to read the Emergency Act for Canada. It's actually a very interesting read. Might save you some later surprises.
I like it. All right, let's move into some upcoming events.
All right, so we got the Podcaster Charity Shoot coming up, hosted by Slamfire Radio, which is July 4th, 2020 in Balmoral, New Brunswick, which is the Restigouche Gun Club. This year's charity of choice is the Rod Harquail Memorial Fund, and there's a link to that. There should be some ticket sales available on Practice Score, but they haven't got it set up yet. But in the meantime, get yourself set up with a Practice Score account, and that way you buy tickets later on. Should be no problem. Should be about $25.
All right, then we've got the annual Preppers Meet coming up in Desboro, Ontario. It's the second week of July. Years past, it's usually run from the Thursday through to the Sunday, so it's always a good weekend of camping and lots of instructions and seminars and such to attend, and you can sit around with like-minded people around the campfire in the evening and don't let the truth get in the way of a good story type setup. So always a good time and lots of good people to go out and meet. So
that seems to be running the country these days, that theory.
Yeah.
Coming up in May 3rd to 9th is Emergency Preparedness Week, and we'll have lots of super nerdy things to talk about during that week. That's all I got for now.
Hughes, you got TACCOM?
Sorry, I don't have the notes up here. Sorry.
No problem. So I'll read it out. TACCOM Canada 2020, September 11th to the 13th. The Canadian Pro Gun Podcasters Network will be in attendance at TACCOM 2020. Your favorite podcasters will be on hand throughout the show, so make sure you stop by the booth to meet your favorites and pick up some swag.
We'll be there too.
Details for the show and tickets and the link in the show notes. We'll move into some shout-outs.
I got nothing.
I'm going to shout out the three exceptionally patient people who are being really, really quiet in the next room. Thanks for putting up with us tonight, guys, and we'll be off soon.
All right. And email and iTunes reviews.
All right, I got one from Owen here. Actually, it's regarding to the the hard alcohol production episode that we had there. Just a couple points he wanted to bring up, which is not major, he said. It's not going to kill people, but sour mash technically has to contain a portion of the previous mash. There are 3 ways to do it theoretically, but that's the simple version. Using grains alone doesn't make it a sour mash. And he says, well, the sugar wash that Hughes did mention does still contain methanol. It's probably not enough to worry about. And I guess technically there's another word for column still, which is reflux still. And other than that, that was pretty much it. Pot still won't strip out the flavors. So that's, I guess, one benefit of a pot still. So you keep the original flavors of the mash in your final product. And the other thing I was just going to ask you about, he mentioned the tails might not need to be filtered out as well. Do you ever do that as well?
I don't know. And again, the method that I use is going on a very specific set of instructions from a manufacturer, in which the manufacturer says that in using the sugar method and using their yeast in their products, you end up with about 1/10 of the methanol that commercial alcohol contains. So as he mentioned as well, it's probably not enough to be worried about, which is why I'm not too worried about it either. So
yeah, that's fair enough. It certainly takes a lot of the guesswork out when you don't have to worry about the heads or tails. So,
right, and the thing is too is I don't have a way to measure how much methanol is in my final product as well, right? So, with that being said, I know that if I was going to make a mash out of anything other than sugar, like any fruits or anything, I know that would contain a lot more methanol. So at that point, I probably would be discarding the foreshot or the head and the tails as well.
Cool.
All right, so I've got an email here from JN, and it says, recently finished your episode with Dr. Joe Elton. The clarification on the N95 masks was great. I'm new to prepping and find your podcast a great resource. With tax season coming up and people potentially receiving a portion of their already earned income back through refunds, would the show consider an episode with the following premise? Someone who is new to prepping has $250 to $500 to spend on prepping to get started. Where, how should they spend their money? Obviously, there would need to be some assumptions made, rural versus urban, single home, apartment, etc. It would be helpful as people usually Google it, and the answers vary from reasonable to bunker dwelling, triple ply tinfoil hat. Thanks for
ply. That's excellent.
Yeah, I gotta go make some additions to my bunker.
I need a couple layers for my hat.
2 ply was good, but let's go into 3 ply with my tax refund.
No, it could definitely be an episode all to itself, which is probably not a bad idea. But if you've got $250 to $500, before you spend your money, spend your time. What is your biggest threat? Remember the rule of threes, right? You can go 3 hours without shelter, 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without food. Based on that, where your weakness is, and start there. It's kind of like bodybuilding. Once you get into it, it'll never be enough, and you'll always keep going, which is it's a fun hobby, right? As much as anything else, it's a really practical hobby, and it's a really fun thing to do, to just keep adding and playing the what if game and overcoming those problems. So we'll certainly get that on the air as another episode coming up soon, because that would be a fun war game. If you had X number of dollars to spend, how would you do it?
Yeah.
Personally, I think spend it on education, and where better to get it than the podcast?
Yeah, just donate $500 to the podcast. That'd be fantastic.
Everything else you need for prepping can be found at rapidsurvival.com.
Or that as well, yes.
Well, I think I'll quote John from the Prepared Mind there. So you need a food, water, shelter, clothing, means self-defense, and a plan. So I guess start with the planning, like Alan said, and work your way backwards from there. Getting 5,000 rounds of ammunition and not even a knife or a first aid kit is probably not the best way to go. So start off with food. Everybody needs that, and so on and so on. And you'd be surprised, $500 actually can get you a long ways. It can, I was actually outfitting my alternate location there in Vancouver, and didn't take much to get some basics that took care of a lot of worries there. So yeah, we'll do an episode for that. Maybe 2 episodes from now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we'll get it out there for sure. Thanks for the suggestion, Jan. We appreciate it. And for iTunes reviews, we've got 44 5 stars. We're at 4 4 stars, 2 3 stars, and we still got that little guy 1 star. But he's keeping us honest, so we'll keep him there. All right. So with that, I'll bring episode 55 of the Canadian Prepper Podcast to an end. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher now, and your favorite podcast app. Please help us out. Take a few minutes, submit a review. It helps other people find us. You can also find us at prepperpodcast.ca and, of course, on Facebook.
Now, we do record these shows live on Facebook and YouTube. If you want an early peek at the show, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Canadian Prepper Podcast. Click the notifications tab. It gives you an alert when we're going live. If you find us on our Facebook page, the Canadian Prepper Podcast, do a quick search. You can get the exact same thing. If you want to contact me directly, you can find me on Instagram at ppswo or Alan at prepperpodcast.ca.
Where can we find you, Colin?
You can find me at Colin at CanadianVets.org. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook as well.
And for me, you can find me on YouTube if you just search for HFX Prepper, or you can reach me by email as well at hughes@canadianprepperpodcast.ca.
All right, you can reach Ian directly by emailing me at theislandretreat@gmail.com, and you can also find me on Canadian Patriot Podcast, also available on iTunes, YouTube. There you can find us discussing more government waste, squirreling off on the firearms-related banter, and exposing the daily loss of freedoms we're facing.
All right, then you can check out Rapid Survival at rapidsurvival.com, and you can get me there on the live chat, of course, while you're buying some prepper gear. You can also email me at feedback@prepperpodcast.ca. Thanks for joining us, and you can tune in for the next episode. We're going to be talking about chickens for the apocalypse. So until next time, be prepared, stay safe,
and keep learning.